Modern Chinese Stories and Novellas from 1919 to 1949, edited by Joseph S.M. Lau, T Hsia, and Leo Wu-Fan-Li. Shen Songwen, called Little Miao Su, Miao being the varied ethnic minority scattered through southwestern China. By many of his disconcerting critics, Shen Songwen indeed shows the local color of his place of origin, the western Henan, with strength and fidelity. Equally well captured in Shen's writing are the joy and dramatic display of emotion in a world that at once primitive and overdeveloped to the point of decay. The primitive comes from the rural roots of the border towns between large counties, where the way of life is indigenous minority groups continues to dominate. Overdeveloped are those institutional features superimposed from the outside and above, multi-layered government bureaucracy without a central government, solidarity without a national army, customs and more of city folk that seem so very irrelevant to the lives of the frontier, not marginal, people. It was a storyteller's insatiable desire to weave everything he touches into a tale that drove Shen to creative writing. He was touched by the growing wave of social consciousness, and his stories reflect a good deal of sympathy for the exploited, but he stayed far away from championing the revolution. The onrush of translations from Russian and European literature affected him, but he struggled with his own vocabulary, groped for his own style, and finally found both. When one reads Shen's 20-odd collections of short stories and full-length novels, one is inevitably won over by his breadth and depth, by the finesse of his characters. Then one proceeds to forget the occasional lapses into verbosity in some of his less mature works. The selections in this anthology came close to representing Shen's multifaceted best. Pai Tzu is a worthy specimen of a story rooted in the rural. A young boatman laughs, chatters, and dances in the rhythm with the boat, and the boat with the river, until the story crests in a dynamic sexual rendezvous with a village woman. Theirs is a primitive rhythm unsoiled by the underdeveloped interposed culture. Shen's soldiering experience reveals itself in 3 men and 1 woman. Their real works its way into legend, and the macabre becomes human and credible. The school teacher in Shen collaborates with the foot soldier in him to create the lamp, which as written, as the author said in the endnote, because of a dream. The quartermaster cook's simple devotion speaks eloquently for a whole nation's tradition, and the ending only accentuates Shen's delight in storytelling. Quiet, written in memory of Pei Sheng, the son of the author's elder sister, reveals an impressionistic beauty of a world divided between pastoral serenity and wartime realities. In Xiao Xiao sees a simple farm girl, inviolable in the strength of her animal purity, situated in a primitive society in which a kind of corrupted Confucian ethic still governs. But neither the unexpected penalty for innocence nor her family's censure can do her any permanent damage. After 1949, Shen made one abortive attempt to adapt his writing to suit the needs of the time, then promptly turned to research in the material culture of ancient China as chief curator at the National Palace Museum. The success of his second career as a research scholar and the nostalgic explanation of his farewell to creative writing has been recorded in an interview with him in the Chinese literary scene. Pai Tzu, translated by Kaiyu Su. Arriving in Chenqiu, a boat docked at the riverside. It was ready for the passengers to go ashore. Over the gangplank, a small board affair with one end over the gunwale of the boat and the other resting on the stone steps of the bank. It sagged and swayed as one walked over it, but one by one the shore-bound managed to swing their way across. Too many boats crowded together along the bank, too many masts lined up, some tall, others short, all pointing at the sky. From a distance, all the rigged seemed tangled, but actually it was not. On the bow and the stern of every boat stood men dressed in blue or black shirts and pants with long tobacco pipes in their mouths. Their forearms and shanks exposed, had long black hair that would remind a child of the fabled hairy demons scurrying around in haunted caves. Or one might be reminded, by the sight of those hairy limbs, of the mercury-like, nimble-footed heroes in folk tales, and one could be right, for these characters could very well just be those heroes. When rigging got stuck in a pulley on the mast, one of them would instantly seize the opportunity to show off his gymnastic agility by slithering up the mast. Who said all he had was on his shanks? There must be a pair of hooks somewhere on his feet. In a flash, up the smooth vertical mast, 20-30 feet high, where the rope was stuck. Just to show again that there was nothing to it, he would sing a baldy song as he straightened out the tangled rigging. A few boats away, another nimble-footed sailor was doing exactly the same thing to impress the spectators, and the two gymnasts would keep up a duet, singing and singing, on and on. Other crew members stood around, cocking their heads to watch the performance and shouting encouragement from time to time. Any one of them could repeat the same feat at any time, if the helmsman would simply nod in his direction. But the boss picked one, and the rest fought the itch in their fingertips, helpless because only one could climb up there and be the hero of the moment, to sing baldy songs to tease the women in the next boat. Helpless, but one could always get even this way. Sonny, you watch, you're gonna fall and smash yourself into pieces the next minute. Hey, kid, see if you keep singing after you've dropped dead. Lots of kidding, lots of laughter, but all the fun of it. The one up there kept singing, louder and louder too, singing One Pretty Flower a moment ago, and now he switched to My Many Buddies, aiming at his admirers below. The many buddies kept looking up at the singer, smiling, all in good humor. Some other boats were hard at work. There many suntanned faces and suntanned bodies were busy, with the same hairy hands and legs, rolling black metal drums off the boats. The drums rolled along the gangplanks and, wobbling a bit, tumbled to rest on the muddy shore. More freight crates came pouring forth, square bundles of textiles tied up with metal strips, round bundles of dried kelp and dried squid and herb medicines. Like the other passengers, these bundles have stayed packed together on a boat for a couple weeks, and now were due to be liberated ashore. The passengers got off the boat, each seeking his own way home, his own inn, and managing his own room aboard. The freight bundles, one after another, tumbled into the arms of a troop of big-footed village women who carried them to the warehouses. In the midst of these quick-tempoed activities, there were also those of leisure, perhaps most unhurried leisure, removed from all these noises, but near enough to hear the songs from up the mast. They were leisurely, but their hearts were aflutter. They had the singers with them the moment the songs hushed and the red lanterns rose to where the singers had been. Red lanterns herald the magic of the evening. The evening brought magic world to the riverside. The rain came and the wind stirred. Shelters went up and men sat underneath listening to the river had become a crazy man. However tightly squeezed together, the boats could not stop themselves from rocking. But if they did not bother the boatmen, they were indifferent. Their life had separated them from the likes and dislikes of those land-based people. If a moon appeared, it would be different, just as the river had different interests under the setting sun or the morning dew. Anyway, these boatmen paid no attention to the weather. Their moods, if they had to be divided into categories, could be arranged in 2 or 3. A meal of beef would cause a mood among them different from a meal of pickled cabbage. These fleet-footed heroes preferred beef, in a similar way that they preferred docking their boats at a river port to just anywhere along the way. The rain had been falling for a while. The muddy riverbank had become slippery, hard to stand on, but just the same boatmen, one by one, went ashore to the waterfront street. Paitsu was one of them. He was tireless, climbing the mast and singing during the day, and never seemed tired out at night either. Like every one of his buddies, he filled his money belt with coppers and stepped onto the gangplank. He walked along the muddy bank with no moon or stars above, only the fine rain sprinkling overhead. His feet churned the mud, and the mud climbed up his legs. He couldn't walk as fast as he wanted to. He headed toward a little red light in the upstairs window of a building fronting the river. Under that light there was something that made Paitsu's heart sing. There were many such little red lights, each of them shining on a boatman or a crowd of them. The feeble light on the lantern could hardly fill a tiny room, yet joy filled the breast of every boatman there to the bursting point. Every eye was half closed as the songs and laughter poured forth from every throat, overflowing the room, spilling into the street, over the bank onto the boats where those without the necessary money stayed behind to listen and curse. They could not go ashore, but their hearts went swaying and swaying over the gangplanks onto the street, following their past experiences toward one or another familiar upstairs room facing the river. Wine, tobacco, and women. What a romantic would brag about this world were the boatmen's regular fare, although the wine burned their tongues and the tobacco smoldered like rice straw in the women. Just the same, every heart pounded violently, every head became giddy, and every mouth, which ordinarily occupied itself with pickled cabbage, pumpkins, or half-rotten beef, or dirty jokes, suddenly turned into honey under the magic of the moment. Every mouth somehow could find sweet nothings in a hidden storage place deep down in the heart to offer the woman before him, and could find its way onto the cheeks, lips, feet, and other parts of the women before him, however in a clumsy way. These men drowned themselves in the air of gaiety. For the moment they forgot the whole world, including their own past and future. The women helped them, replacing their poverty, hard life, and expectations with excited intoxication, like wine, like tobacco. Over each of these women, a crowd of boatmen dreamed their dreams, most realistic and courageous dreams, ready to shower on her all the money and all the energy they had saved up for a month. They asked for nobody's sympathy. They were not at all sorry for themselves. If they had a moment to reflect on their lives in a different setting, perhaps they would still feel satisfied. They had a few tears to spare, but they had lots of fun. Paitsu finally reached his happiness. He pounded his fist on the door, and in the boatman's habit whistled at the same time. The door loosened. With one of his muddy legs still outside the threshold, Paitsu found himself clutched in a pair of bare arms, and a cheek, warm and wide, pressed itself against his sunburned and newly shaven face. The hair oil smelled familiar. The embrace, though he couldn't have described it a moment before, felt equally familiar the moment it happened. And that cheek, soft and powdered scented, was only waiting there for him to lick and suck. It was only a swift moment before he turned and caught a wet tongue between his lips. He nibbled on it. She wiggled and scolded him. "Damn you, I thought you'd been washed into the lake by the urine of those cheap women in Changte. I'm gonna bite your tongue off. I'm gonna bite your—" He got inside the door. Under the red lantern light, she looked at him with an adoring smile. He stood a head taller. He swooped to gather her waist to him, as gathering up the lines of the boat, she leaned forward. "I'm sick of rowing. I want to push a wheelbarrow." "Push your mother's," she said, one hand busy searching his pockets, tossing everything she found onto the bed, naming them one by one. A jar of cold cream, a roll of paper, a handkerchief, another jar. "Hey, what's in this jar?" "Guess." "Guess your mother's. You forgot to bring me face powder?" "Look at the label on the jar. Open it and see." She couldn't read. The label, she saw two pretty girls. She opened the jar under the lantern and took a sniff, which made her sneeze. He was delighted. She snatched the jar and laid it on the bench, grabbing the woman, rolled her onto the bed. The lantern light shone on a collection of muddy footprints on the floor. The rain came down, thick and heavy now. Songs mingled with curses and laughter continued in the air, only a thin layer of unpainted board as the partition. One could hear even the drag on a tobacco pipe on the other side, but everyone was too busy to eavesdrop. The muddy footprints dried and became better defined on the floor as the lantern shone on the pair who lay across the bed. "Paitsu, you're a bull. If I didn't show you, you wouldn't believe how well-behaved I was downriver." "Well-behaved, huh? I dare you to swear you're pure enough to enter the temple of heavenly ruler," she said. "Swear your mother's. You're the only one who believes in swearing. I don't." There was truth in the woman saying that Pao Tzu was a bull. The bull was now panting, relaxed like a bundle of muddy lines from a boat coiling endlessly on the edge of the bed. He clenched the 2 fat breasts, bit them, then bit her lower lip, her shoulder, her thigh. Yes, it was the exact same Pao Tzu who had sung his songs on the top of the mast. Lying on her back, she watched his every motion, a satisfied smile on her face. A little later, they put a tray of opium-smoking paraphernalia between them and started working on the pipe. She deftly rolled the opium paste on the stick while humming a folk song, Meng Qiang's Lament at the Great Wall. Pai Tzu was the king, sipping tea and puffing on the opium pipe. "Women, let me tell you," he said, "those girls downriver are really good-looking. I'd die just thinking of them." "Why don't you die right there? Why didn't you come back here, then?" "They don't look at me, even if I offer them my life." "So my turn comes only when they don't even look at you?" "Your turn? You... Tell me how many men you've had before it's my turn. Tell me how many." With a grimace, she fitted a bean of baked opium paste on the pipe and pushed the pipe into Pao Tzu's mouth to shut him up. Pao Tzu drew on the pipe, then asked again, "Let me ask you, who was here with you yesterday?" "Who, your mother's? I've been waiting for you, counting the days. I figured that stinking corpse of yours would... If I really got lost over the blue surf rapids, you'd be happy, wouldn't you?" "Yeah, I'd be overjoyed." She was getting angry. He liked to tease her, making her mad. When he saw her pull a long face, he pushed the opium tray aside. Without the barrier between them, the scene quickly changed. In less than a minute, he had his muddy legs stretched over the edge of the bed. Clutching these legs were a pair of tiny feet sleethed under red silk slippers. An unabashed exertion, a divine wrath, a resumption, a fresh beginning. Under pouring rain, Pao Tzu walked along the muddy shore. In his hand was a lighted torch, a section of old, discarded bamboo-woven cable that had been used to pull the boat when going upstream. The light probed 3 feet of darkness around him and picked out silvery streaks of the rain. He walked through these streaks, his feet splashing in the muddy water. His business ashore finished, he was returning to his boat. It rained hard, yet he was not in a hurry. Perhaps because he didn't want to slip and fall, also perhaps because he had with him something to shelter him from... No, better say, to make him forget about the rain. His heart warmed to the recollection of what lingered before his eyes. He recalled all that lingered before his eyes, then the rain over his head and the mud under his feet did not invite his attention. Was she sleeping now, or tumbling with another man in that same unpainted wooden bed? Who could tell? And he was not about to let it bother him. He retained her in his memory, every small detail, the curves, the undulations, the most private and secret. He felt he could touch her even if there were 1,000 miles between them, and he could tell the size and contours of every part of her body. Her laughter and her movements clung to his heart like so many leeches, and that was enough. There was more than enough for his month-long labor, 30 days of hot sun and hard rain, even with his gambling losses all tossed in, and perhaps even with the fun expected on his next downriver trip tossed in. Still, he'd be ahead. It would be another 2 weeks or a month on this trip, but he would work happily for all those days, eat, sleep happily for all those days. Tonight he had had a feast of satisfactions, and what he had tonight could easily last 1, even 2 months. Surely he would return to her before that. His money belt was empty, but it was worth every copper. Besides, he had put away a bit to reserve for gambling on board. What did he get for his money? He didn't want to try figuring that one out. He had no interest in figuring out how money came to him and how it went away. Even if he did sometimes think about it, he would always conclude that he was ahead. He hummed the tune of Meng Qiang's Lament at the Great Wall, then the tune of 2 lovers playing dominoes. He reached the gangplank and carefully stepped aboard. His humming stopped abruptly before he got to 18 Ways of Touching Her, because the boss's wife was there, breastfeeding her child. Pao Tzu heard her softly talking to the child, and the sounds of the child suckling. The boats calling at Chen Chao port belonged to different guilds, each having its own fixed docked place for the vessels. As soon as each boat unloaded its cargo, it had to be on its way. This time, Pausu got ashore only twice, and the boat promptly left with him on board.